Which of these stories will you be talking about tomorrow? The still unrevealed, still secret, still legally dubious bonus secret Bush program to get al-Qaeda, the one on which CIA Director Panetta pulled the emergency brake this spring, then told Congress. Dick Cheney ordered the CIA to not tell Congress for 8 years, but was that because the plan was too much or because the plan was too little? Special prosecutor. The words are but whispers, but they're the whispers of the Attorney General, Mr. Holder. An actual criminal investigation into torture? The Sotomayor hearings, invitation to an anticlimax. As Senator Graham says to her, unless you have a complete meltdown, you're going to get confirmed. And the Sarah Conwoman Chronicles. She's going to start her own conservative party with Democrats. Plus, Levi Johnson is now talking about her, quote, stress levels. All that and more now on Countdown. Good evening from New York. The same Bush-Cheney administration which failed to heed warnings from its own officials and from al-Qaeda itself, that failed to prevent the worst attack ever on U.S. soil, that failed to get the perpetrators of that attack, is also, we learned today, the same administration which failed to come up with a single viable plan for the CIA to capture or kill members of al-Qaeda, despite running an 8-year-long mission so secret that the vice president ordered the CIA to not tell Congress about it. The Wall Street Journal today reporting that discussion of plans to kill al-Qaeda leaders tapered off within 6 months after 9/11, quoting a former intelligence official saying Bush and Cheney did not support a proposal to send teams of CIA and special forces after al-Qaeda the way Israel got the terrorists to attack the Munich Olympics. On March 13, 2002, 6 months, 2 days after 9/11, Mr. Bush himself said publicly of bin Laden, quote, I truly am not that concerned about him. Tonight's fifth story, Mr. Cheney now reduced to defending their toughness by sending his daughter out to defend them, spinning that Wall Street Journal story, as we will dissect presently, to suggest that it somehow reveals Democratic weakness on national security. Cheney forced to play defense now with the weekend's revelation that it was he who ordered the CIA not to comply with the laws requiring full intel briefings for congressional leaders, followed quickly by today's Wall Street Journal story that what Mr. Cheney concealed from Congress were those failed attempts to come up with CIA plans for getting al-Qaeda, a story that raises a host of questions, considering that congressional leaders had already been briefed about the president's 2001 directive ordering the capture and killing of al-Qaeda members. On June 23rd of this year, CIA officials concerned about misleading Congress still told new director Leon Panetta about the al-Qaeda effort. What details about it no one has yet said. Panetta then told Congress, essentially confirming to the dismay of the right wing, Speaker Pelosi's previous claim that the CIA had not told her in 2002 about the waterboarding it was conducting at that time. Let me turn first to Jane Mayer, author of The Dark Side, the inside story of how the war on terror turned into a war on American ideals, and of course a staff writer at The New Yorker magazine. Thanks for your time tonight.
Great to be with you.
Congress and the public obviously have known for years that President Bush authorized the CIA to kill members of al-Qaeda. Probably no one would have an argument with that. So there would have been no reason to withhold that from Congress if that was the end of it. Certainly no reason for that to stun members of Congress, as they reportedly were stunned when the director briefed them last month. So what is it that we're missing in this narrative?
Well, there's some details here, obviously, that we don't yet have, though they seem to be coming together. There's a story in the British press, and it sounds like the New York Times is working on a piece too, that suggests that these were kind of Mossad-like hit squads that were going to be authorized possibly to operate in some of our allied countries without informing the governments in those countries. So there's some potentially controversial aspects to this that haven't completely surfaced yet. And you know, I mean, part of the reason I think that it's worth thinking about why Congress would be upset about this is if you go back into the history of the CIA's the whole idea of intelligence oversight. It came out in the 1970s after plans for assassination attempts surfaced that involved the CIA. So the idea that Cheney might have specifically tried to keep Congress from knowing about what could be seen as assassination attempts, it's certainly going to push a lot of buttons up on the Hill.
I know that Seymour Hersh's hint of a story in Minnesota in the spring was about stuff run out of the Pentagon and specifically not tied to the CIA, but it does seem rather remarkable that we might be talking about, in a period of months, 2 secret assassination squads somehow touching touching on the Vice President of the United States. Is that too much of a coincidence? Could we be talking about the same squad or just two aspects of the same operation?
Well, I mean, from what we know so far anyway about this particular hit squad was that it was never up and running. They did, though, it sounds like, begin to train specific killers who might be able to rove the world looking for al-Qaeda members. I mean, and we know, of course, we've got a drone program that kills them from the sky, but there's something different about them working secretly in, allied countries. So, and in terms of Cheney, I mean, what we've seen over the last few months, really, is that every time another document comes out about the Bush administration's programs, you can see Cheney's fingerprints on it. And so, basically, take a look at there was a fascinating report that came out this last Friday that was put together by inspector generals in the intelligence community. It's full of details about both Cheney and his former lawyer, David Addington. They were the people who seemed to be behind the warrantless wiretapping program. And somehow, weirdly, it was up to them to decide which other lawyers got to be cued in about this in the administration. So you had this very strange situation where there was this intense secrecy, and many of the subject area experts were kept out of knowing about these programs.
Jane, maybe I'm being a little simple in asking this, but if you put everything together, is it possible that the reason Cheney would have pushed for the secrecy here was not because too much was done too illegally to try to get al-Qaeda, but that ultimately the history of this program would show how little was done to get al-Qaeda?
Well, I mean, I think one of the revelations that came out in that, certainly in the Inspector General's report, which is very important, I think, was that on the warrantless surveillance program, which twisted our Constitution into knots, turns out to have been ineffective. According to government experts who are nonpartisan, it did not help in any serious way in our anti-terror efforts. So, I mean, I think it is possible that the more we know about some of these programs, the more we're going to find out that they were unnecessary.
Speaking of unnecessary, last point here, the Washington Post reported today that the CIA had hid from Congress. It was called a technically oriented intelligence collection effort unrelated to terrorism suspects, and that was the Wall Street Journal version of this. Should we be skeptical about these anonymous sources suddenly appearing with details that seem so wildly at variance from what we think we know?
Well, I mean, I think that there's probably a real jump ball going on politically to try to paint what was withheld from Congress as unimportant. If, the CIA and some of the Republicans on the Hill are trying to say this wasn't an important program. But if it turns out to have actually been an elite sort of assassin squad that could work in various countries without telling the host countries, I think it's going to be hard to say it was minor.
Yeah, and certainly they won't say it was minor. Jane Mayer of the New Yorker magazine, author of The Dark Side. Great, thanks for your time tonight.
Glad to be with you.